What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Scouting the Fins right here on the 3 Yards Per Carry podcast feed, also part of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. The Miami Dolphins are 3-7, and many people are thinking if this was an accident that they won against the Buffalo Bills. Well, I'm here to tell you it wasn't. But in case of any accident for you, you need to be ready. After an accident, your first move should be calling 305-800-PAIN. Better Business Bureau accredited with an A+ rating. Your car accident personal injury specialist. Fast connection with trusted doctors and attorneys. Always ready to take your call 24/7. Again, 305-800-PAIN. That is 305-800-PAIN. And as always, this show is brought to you by ThompsonCigar.com. Use promo code 3yards20. That's right. Use promo code 3yards20 for 20% off your order of $75 or more. And here we are. Coach and Eric, gentlemen, from Miami Gardens to Madrid, Spain, the Miami Dolphins are heading overseas, riding one of their most complete stretches of football, beating the Buffalo Bills 30-13.
Sí, estoy emocionado para hablar de ese partido de fútbol.
When did you learn Spanish?
Middle school.
I did too. Spanish was actually a requirement for both of us.
Yeah.
In middle school. So I'm surprised you said that. Yeah, coach was like, what the heck?
I have no idea what we're doing today, apparently. I did not know we were going in Spanish today.
Yeah, no. Excited to talk about this game. I think that, and we'll get into it. I think this could be the start of a stretch of games here that Bradley Chubb used the word delusional last week. And I think we've known the Dolphins fan base, on occasion to get a little delusional themselves. This could be the start of a stretch here that gets people a little delusional about this football team. So I'm excited to talk about this game.
Yeah, I'm going to be a little hesitant about getting delusional. I told you guys before that I'm not letting this team hurt me, and I am looking forward to the fact that this game on Sunday is going to be played at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time, and that whatever happens, whether it's a win and I'm thrilled for the rest of the day, or it's a loss and it's out of the way, I'm looking forward to being able to wake up and watch some football, especially the Dolphins this Sunday.
Yeah, on this episode, we're going to dive into how the Dolphins have quietly transformed into a struggling, inconsistent units on both sides of the ball to now what looks to be one of the more balanced teams in the NFL on the offense and defensive side of the ball, and why their new offensive identity and a certain player might just be their best weapon yet. Plus, we're going to break down the defensive resurgence, the schematic shift towards heavy personnel, and how Miami matches up against a Washington Commanders team who's down Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, Daron Payne, and others. We're going to take a look at some key metrics as well, but let's start with where this Dolphins team stands, right? It looks like getting the bad man out, getting Chris Greer out, the Miami Dolphins have stabilized at least for a week. After parting ways with Chris Greer, it's been a transitional few weeks off the field. But on the field, it looks like a completely different team. They look more physical, they look more intentional, and they look more complete.
Yeah, I think it's really something that started against Atlanta. Obviously the game against Baltimore kind of sticks out like a sore thumb in this last 3-game stretch. But I think when you actually go back and watch that game, as I kind of referenced before, it was really just like a series of unfortunate events that kind of snowballed on themselves and made the outcome look a lot worse than how they had actually played that game. Outside of Now, don't get me wrong, there were a litany of crucial errors, but it's one of those things where you play 85% of the game well, but the 15% is just so catastrophically bad that you end up losing by 22 points. When you look at what this team has been able to do, I think conviction is actually a very good word. And it's something that they've been harping on. I think the move to go to a heavier personnel is something that's been kind of it was necessitated to them by injuries, but I think that they've kind of found something with that, with their run game, and I think it's also unlocked glimpses of the old Tua in terms of his efficiency, and I think that we've seen that over the last few weeks. I think that that's something that we will continue to see again this week, as just a preview of how I think this game is going to go. But then defensively, you want to talk about conviction. This is a defense that it felt really, when you watched the film and you watched the mistakes they were making, particularly in the run game, it really felt like the players on the field were just really unsure of what they were doing at all times. And right now, there is just an absolute certainty in the way that they're playing. They're attacking their assignments. And it's just, I don't know what changed specifically on the defensive side of the football. But I mean, it's night and day. And I think it's something that can carry over throughout the rest of the season. But my fear with this team is that they hang over from beating Buffalo this past Sunday.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern. And, I know that Chris Kaufman over on the 3 yards per carry Discord talked about the struggles that the Dolphins have had with games that are not normal, and Madrid would fall into that with the short, well, not short week, but in terms of traveling, it definitely changes your schedule there. So when you add that into the idea of celebrating the Buffalo game too long, that is certainly a valid concern. It feels to me that offensively things have gotten more simple. And I think when you go to that 6 offensive line set, you go back to that. Like you don't put Dan Brunskill in and run the most complicated things you have. When you add that 6 offensive linemen in, you're going back to your base packages for a lot of that. And I think that is part of the reason that we're seeing Tua return to what he was before. That now we're seeing the scheme kind of the scheme be the lead for the offense versus having Tua be the lead for the offense. And we're seeing the skill players understand where they need to be and when much better, because it's just a simpler form of the offense. When you're adding that 6 offensive linemen, you're taking away an eligible receiver. Essentially, I know that Brunskill reports is eligible, and hopefully someday we'll see him catch a pass, but you're taking away a receiving option there. So it comes down to guys, now we're going back to depending on Waddle, Achane, right? Malik Washington sometimes just beating their guy one-on-one instead of trying to out-scheme the defense. And then for the Dolphins defensively, Hassam, I know that you brought it up several weeks ago about all of the new pieces that were on this defense that we didn't really expect. And we had the scheme returning, but almost everybody returning on this defense was new, right? So it's one thing to have a scheme, but having players in the scheme is a different animal. And I think that what we're seeing is a confidence in that scheme these last few weeks. When they earlier in the season felt like guys were just trying to do too much. They were trying to play multiple responsibilities, and it ended up getting them out of position. And I think that you're seeing them play with a speed and confidence that they know that the guys around them are going to be in the right place. And when you have that confidence, like if you're a linebacker that has the B gap assignment and you know that your nose tackle has the A gap and you know your defensive end has the C gap, right? Now you can attack that B gap a lot more aggressively. And now everybody has their run lanes filled, and it's not necessarily one player standing out. I know that Jordan Brooks has been playing out of this world, right? But the way that he is playing is very much dependent on the guys around him, right? The Jordan Phillips, the Matthew Judon, right? There's just role players playing their roles, filling their gaps, and allowing other players to make the plays. So for me, that's the biggest difference both on offense and defense, is to the difference in the team we've seen over these last 3 weeks, and hopefully that we'll see through the rest of the season.
Yeah, let's talk about the shifts on both sides of the ball, but specifically for the offense. The X factor for Miami's offense is the heavy personnel. Head coach Mike McDaniel has learned a little bit from the Atlanta game to now how to marry the finesse, the speed, and the physicality. Six offensive linemen, sometimes that sixth offensive lineman acting like a second or third tight end attached to the formation, Hayden Rucci or Greg Dulcich inline attached to the formation. And a little bit of a commitment to power football and running the ball. And it's working. Not so much utilizing different types of motions, but simple motions that can also give a little bit of misdirection and confuse the defense. Daniel Brunskill, I feel like, has been the X factor for this Dolphins offense. Not because he's flashy, not because he's producing numbers, but the impact that he has brought to the Dolphins, at least the last 3 weeks, which comes, at the turn of Darren Waller getting hurt and going on IR. And I think that injury of Darren Waller pretty much forced Mike McDaniel's hand to be like, okay, we need a blocker. We need to be able to get the run game going. We are seeing the run game work. Let's feast off of that. From my data analysis from jumbo sets, specifically 6 OLs from weeks 1 through 10, in terms of EPA per play, Miami is the second best in the NFL. In all EPA per play, that's combined passing and rushing. And that's with 41 plays. All right. 75% of those plays came from week 7 through 10, just in the last 3 weeks. In terms of passing the ball, out of, 6 OLs on there, 2 is the third best quarterback. The Miami Dolphins are the third best. And this is mainly 10 out of 10 teams who run 6 offensive linemen with a minimum of 20 plays from weeks 1 through 10. They're not the best at running the ball in terms of EPA and success rate, but they're getting at least 3 or 4 yards rather than the usual, -2 or -3 on the crack tosses that we see out of 11 personnel or in the gun. Yards per play, they are third. First down conversions per attempt, they are fourth. And third down conversion, they are number 1 overall, but with only 1 play on third down, which was the Ollie Gordon run on 3rd and 2 against Atlanta. But the kicker here is based on the down and distance. So first down, which is usually 1st and 10, the Dolphins are the best team in the league in EPA per dropback. So whenever Tua passes, he has a very high EPA, which is a 0.53. In terms of running the ball on first down out of those jumbo sets, they are the worst. So, Coach, I want your analysis on this. In terms of passing the ball, that's elite efficiency. It may not just be a gimmick, but it can provide sustainable success built on discipline and design. But how can that improve in the run game, specifically on first down, when teams know that your tendency to run on first down is much more higher than the Dolphins actually pass on first down?
I think it just comes down to the efficiency they've had in the passing game, right? When you bring Dan Brunskill out as that 6th offensive lineman, especially on first down, a defense should know that there's a high likelihood that you are going to run the ball. So linebackers are going to be more aggressive filling. You're going to see more run blitzes. You're going to see those safeties walking into the box. So, while you still need to do it, it makes sense that the defense is going to play that, a lot more aggressively. And that would be why your EPA is lower in that situation. But the counter to that is that it's opening stuff up in the passing game. If those linebackers are being more aggressive, if they have to walk up a safety because you now have a sixth offensive lineman out there, right? Now it's going to open more stuff up. We've seen them, run the boot play action where they bring Dulcich behind the line of scrimmage and Tua rolls out and hits him. Like, it just opens up more simple stuff like that. So you got to find that balance, right? If the defense is going to give you the pass in that situation, then you pick and choose your spots. You cannot come out and throw the ball every time in those situations. Like I said, you still have to be able to run the ball. You have to be able to, have success even when a team knows that you're going to run the ball. But, if you pick those key scenarios to be able to pass the ball, then you're going to continue to find, some big time benefits from that, because with the way the defense is playing, it's going to open up some bigger windows or just bigger opportunities that you can hit in the passing game.
So here's the thing, in the passing game with those 6 OLs, they're not blitzing the Dolphins a lot, especially on first down. Just less than a 13% blitz rate, which is, last in the league in terms of blitzing with 6 offensive linemen. And in turn, coach, as you're saying, that gives Tua a pretty clean pocket. And if you're doing play action boot plays, or you're doing shot plays, or even if you run simple mesh with, 3 pass catchers on there, you're going to have time to throw. And if you give Tua time to throw, more likely than not, he should be able to find his guy if, the coverage isn't perfect, which leads me to my point. Maybe they're not trying to stop the run on, those second and third downs. Maybe they want them to run and put the Dolphins in second and longs. But lately, the Dolphins haven't been the last 3 weeks, Eric, except for the Baltimore game. And there was just a lot of miscues in that game.
Yeah, I think Coach really did a good job kind of breaking it down. And I think part of the brilliance of the 6th offensive lineman with Dan Brunskill is it's not necessarily even it is about the run game. Don't get me wrong, it is. But it's also about understanding your personnel and putting your offense into advantageous matchups, because you know what the defense is going to do when they see that 6th offensive lineman come in there. There's a reason why they're not off, or defenses are blitzing at only 13% on first down when with the 6th offensive lineman with the heavy package. It's because defenses understand that with Devon Achane back there, if they get too far upfield on the blitz and he gets to the second level, he's gone. And that's really a risk that they're not particularly willing to take. And I think it also has brought back the deep ball to the offense. We saw it this past week against Buffalo with Jalen Waddle. We've seen Tua talk about it too, just from a mental perspective. He certainly feels a lot better having Daniel Brunskill in there, and I think you can see that with the way that he's been playing lately. And then really, I think the idea is, even if you have a negative EPA, I'd be really interested to see what the splits are by quarter on that. Because I feel like maybe in the first and second quarter, maybe it's not great, but the idea is by third quarter, fourth quarter, that heavy personnel just kind of grinds down on the defense. We saw Devon Achane break the 2 really big runs at the end of the game last week against Buffalo. So I'd be curious to see what those splits look like. But I think that this move has just done wonders for the offense. Obviously, there's going to be more counters that come, and we'll see how Mike McDaniel adjusts to those. But right now, I mean, it's been a fantastic development.
Yeah. I think it's also a testament to the offensive line's growth, and also helps Dan Brunskill out there, especially once he's attached to the left side, or if he's in the backfield on the left side. He can help Jonas Avenai. I mean, Jonas Avenai hasn't looked the best this entire season, but we haven't really seen him, give up something so damaging within the last 3 weeks, at least. And also speaks to the versatility of Devon Achane. He ranks 5th in rush EPA per play and is at least top 20 in success rate. So with A-Chain's you know basically play style and how he is as a runner, it helps a lot. Uh, and with the addition of Daniel Brunskill doing this and whoever, is doing the personnel on this, it gives, this offense the flexibility to toggle between gap and zone concepts and different types of man and zone blocking schemes. Also, in the passing game, you could have pullers, you could have, split flow action blocking, especially in the passing game. And the defense, they're trying to sell out to stop the run. And meanwhile, you have, a tight end coming across the middle, or you have a glance route for Jalen Waddle that's wide open, and Tua just hits him straight for the money shot on first down. And first down attempts for Miami, they are number one in first down conversions overall when they have 6 offensive linemen on the field. So this is making it harder for opposing defenses to read Miami's intention pre-snap, even when they simplify the motion game. We haven't seen a lot of motion lately, but it's more so simplifying it, not making it redundant, and as Coach said, make it simple. All right, before we talk about the defense, here is a message from our sponsors. And we're back. Now to the Dolphins defense. I mean, guys, what a turnaround for Anthony Weaver's unit. The first 6 weeks were an absolute mess. The Dolphins ranked bottom of the barrel in EPA per rush, pass, play, and success rate. But since week 7, Miami's defense has completely flipped the script. They are first in EPA per rush defended. They are 8th in success rate, and they are 12th in EPA per play allowed. That is elite defensive metrics. That is elite defensive numbers up against a Ravens offense, a Bills offense, and even a little bit of the Falcons offense as well. Right now, as it is for the metrics, this is a top 10 defense by every meaningful metric that counts.
I thought you were going there.
I thought you were going.
Nope, I got it. So, yeah, this defense has made a tremendous resurgence, right? We're seeing, again, a defense that's playing confident, playing together. Bradley Chubb has really come on lately, and I don't want to say that Jalen Phillips was ever really expendable. He's a great player, not going to downplay that at all. But one of the things that I noticed against the Bills this past week was with Jalen Phillips no longer being on the team, with Chop Robinson unavailable, saw Zach Sealer moving around a lot more than we did in previous weeks. We saw Zach Sealer, playing as a 1 technique, playing as a 3 technique, even saw him bumped out as a defensive end where we had, some of the young guys in there at defensive tackle, and we had Sealer playing as like a heavy end, which is really going to help those, the run defense. And I like the idea because Jalen Phillips was playing the highest percentage of snaps of edge players on the team. So with him no longer on the team, as much as I like Chop Robinson, he's not the same as some of these other edges against the run. So if you can put Zach Sealer at end and bring in some of these young tackles on early downs and be able to be stout against the run, then I feel like you're going to open up opportunities to bring Chop in, very fresh in those passing situations and get after it. And, we've also seen some of these young guys in the secondary stepping up. Dante Trader, a guy they've been very high on from all the way back to the preseason. The coaches talked very highly of him, and he's being able to show that on the field. Their safeties that they have right now between Trader, between Minka, with Melifonwu, Ashton Davis when he's back in the lineup. Like, these guys are all very versatile in terms of the alignments that they can play in. I think that gives Anthony Weaver a lot of flexibility in the way that he can call the defense. And then, of course, you have, the big game from Juju Brents this past week. So, as we continue to get these young guys that are stepping up, that are showing that they're capable of doing more, right? Then I think that you're expanding that toolbox that Anthony Weaver can use for the play calling. And I think that's where we're kind of getting with this defense, is now that he is really understanding the personnel that he has out there. And, he's been dialing up some great play calls, some great blitzes, pressures, all that stuff. And so I think a lot of it is just getting familiar with the personnel that he has now, and these young guys growing in the roles that they have, and, showing they can be trusted.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at, particularly, you go position group by position group, I think it's maybe the idea that a guy like, to your point, Coach, you made the point earlier that Jordan Brooks, looks like he's playing out of his mind right now, but is he really playing better, or is the defense around him putting him in position to showcase what he's been, he could have been doing this the entire season or something close to it. I think when you look at the growth of the young interior tackles in the run game, that's been extremely encouraging over the last few weeks. I look at Jordan Phillips. I mean, he was just an absolute force along the inside against Buffalo. And I think you're getting, like you mentioned, Bradley Chubb. I mean, 9 pressures. He was phenomenal. He's been really good over the last few weeks. He's been their most consistent edge rusher just about all season long. I think that they finally got a safety combination that they're really comfortable with between Minka, Dante Trader, and Ifeatu Melifonwu. And then, I don't know what's going to happen when Rasul Douglas gets back as far as the cornerback room goes. But I would be, actually, I think it potentially makes for a very interesting cornerback room, because I don't know what you do with Jack Jones, because, I mean, his penchant for forcing turnovers has been really solid this year, but I am intrigued by Brents and Douglas on the outside and Marshall moving back to that nickel spot, kind of being your base setup there with those 3 guys. I don't think Anthony Weaver is doing anything all that different. I think much like Mike McDaniel has kind of simplified the offense for a lot of the guys. It feels like things, whether it's something's been simplified or it's just clicking with the young guys now, the execution has just kind of hit another level. I don't think it's anything, sometimes it's really just that simple. And I think that it's really been a matter of execution by the players over the last few weeks that's vastly improved on defense.
Well, the other thing about the defense is that with the amount of depth they have in the defensive backroom and defensive line, it allows for these younger guys to be a bit more fresh, and even the veterans, because, I mean, hey, even Zach Sealer is taking off snaps, right? He looks a bit more fresher. You can have Jason Marshall Jr. sub in for Rasul Douglas, who, is just coming off an injury, and, he can take off a couple of snaps. You can, take off Melifonwu. You can take off Ashton Davis. You can put Dante Trader in there as well to replace them. And Trader has played more snaps at safety than Minka Fitzpatrick did up against Buffalo and Baltimore. It's more so about these young guys getting much more comfortable in this scheme, and Anthony Weaver and their personnel department on defense just mixing and matching combination and calling, plays to their strengths. They are much better now in cover 3, and they're much better blitzing in zone coverage now on cover 2, 4, and 3 as well. There was also a point in the Buffalo game where they ran a cover 6 play post-snap, and Josh Allen was confused. Pre-snap, he's like, oh, it looks like Minka Fitzpatrick is coming down to the line, and then he rolls right out. looks like Dante Trader Jr. was coming up to the line, and then he rolled right back out to be the deep third safety, and Josh Allen was like, uh-oh. So he tries to run, and he gets sacked from behind by Zach Sealer. So if they can do that to Josh Allen, you better believe they can do that to Marcus Mariota. But now look, the Dolphins head to Madrid to face the Washington Commanders with Marcus Mariota at the helm. This is a team like the Miami Dolphins who do very well with 6 offensive linemen on the field. They're ranked second in EPA per play out of these jumbo sets, just behind Pittsburgh and ahead of Miami. Washington runs a very heavy running offense that is very methodical, very precise, and thrives on early down efficiency. They average 5.6 yards per rush and have the second highest yards per play out of that jumbo set in those packages, which means Miami's front seven is going to be tested. And it looks like the Dolphins' front seven defensive front has changed a little bit and how they match up at the line. Before, it was more so of a 3-4 look, 4-3 with even fronts, Coach and Eric. But now they shifted more so towards an odd front where they play a 5-2 defense with the linebackers more so out on the edges, allowing Jordan Brooks and Tyrell Dodson to hit those gaps and make those tackles. And we're seeing an increase of snaps for Jordan Phillips so that way he can control that trench play. So the big key here is for Jordan Phillips, Zach Sealer, and Jordan Brooks to control the line of scrimmage on those early downs. We saw that against Buffalo. We saw that up against Atlanta. If they can minimize the effectiveness of Washington's running backs like Ja'Cory Crosby-Merritt and Chris Rodriguez, and they contain Marcus Mariota and don't make him do any damage with his legs on first down, they're going to be in very good position because I'll tell you what, on second down, this Commanders rushing offense is absolutely lethal in terms of this jumbo package. They are able to get almost 1.36 EPA per dropback, whether if it's Marcus Mariota or Jaden Daniels, because second and shorts, whether it be, second and 6, second and 5, second and 3, it opens up the entire playbook. It opens up the entire playbook for their offensive coordinator, which I believe is Cliff Kingsbury. Correct me if I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. Whatever the heck he wants.
Yeah. I think that what we're seeing from the Dolphins now is what we talked about heading into the season of what we wanted to see on these early downs. We wanted to see these 5 defensive line sets where we had essentially 3 defensive tackles in there along with the edges, right? You get, a Benito Jones or a Jordan Phillips over the nose, right? Zach Sealer and Kenneth Grant playing out there as your 3 techniques, a couple of edges, and you keep those linebackers clean. So that is something they have used. It feels like more often they're getting more of these defensive tackles on the field on early downs. But I feel like even outside of that the way that this defense has kind of transitioned, they are built to stop the run. We talked about Zach Sealer playing a little more defensive end, and that's going to be in more of those 4-down lineman sets, right? You get Bradley Chubb or Matthew Judon on one side, Sealer on the other, and then you throw 2 defensive tackles in between them, right? That's still a very heavy defensive line that makes it difficult to run against, especially if you put Zach Sealer on the tight end side. There's not a tight end in the league that can block Zach Sealer one-on-one, so you kind of almost shut down one side of the offense in terms of running the ball just by doing that. And then even when you get into the nickel looks, as the season has progressed, the Dolphins have used way less 3 cornerback sets. They're using Minka a lot more as that nickel player where you're putting 3 safeties on the field. So now, even though you're in your nickel defense, you're in a lighter defense. It's 3 safeties that are in there. So we're not talking about a corner that is now on the field playing in the slot trying to defend the run. Right now, it is you got Minka playing there, or you can put Iffy there, or you can put Dante Trader there. Right now, you have another safety up there who might not be as effective as a linebacker, but all of those guys are way more effective than the
They all can
quarterback you
tackle.
have.
Yep.
And they all can
Right,
tackle. You
that's
saw that play from Minka on the 2-point conversion against Khalil
Oh,
Shakir.
fantastic effort on that. But that just to my point there, like no matter what set the Dolphins are in, it feels like they're very well equipped to defend the run. And that the 5-2 defense that you were talking about, the top there of this segment, Hassan, right? That again is what we talked about early in the season that we wanted to see them be able to do. We want to see them be able to come out in those, we talk about jumbo sets on offense, like that's essentially your jumbo set on defense that you're rolling out there on first down to challenge a team to throw the ball against you. Like you should be able to roll that out and be confident that you're not going to be in second and short because of a run, right? And when you can do that and make the offense a little more predictable in that sense, then it opens up opportunities.
And I think you know what, Eric, you go ahead.
Okay, yeah. I think seeing Atlanta, Baltimore, and Buffalo was a really good 3-game stretch to have before facing this particular Commanders team, because you mentioned their bread and butter is running the football, and the Dolphins just saw 3 teams whose bread and butter is kind of running the football. And Washington, while beaten up, I mean, right now along the outside, there are no pass catchers that I fear.
Well,
Debo Samuel is good.
not even Debo.
Luke McCaffrey's out too.
Not even Debo. This is their tight ends, Eric.
Okay.
The Dolphins still struggle with tight ends. I mean, look what the Ravens did with their tight end set with Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely and Charlie Kolar. Lamar Jackson threw 3 touchdowns to the tight ends. Dalton Kincaid was having a game before he got hurt a little bit, and then also against the Falcons. I believe not Kyle Pitts, but Charlie Warner was, giving the Dolphins defense a little bit of work in the run game. It's more so the threat of the tight ends for Washington that I fear. They have a very good one in Zach Ertz. It's their tight ends and running backs that I'm fearful of.
And that's fair enough. I think right now, if you can get Marcus Mariota into situations where, if you can put Marcus Mariota into the same situations that you put Josh Allen into last week, you're gonna get a very similar result, if not better defensively. Because Marcus Mariota is not Josh Allen. He's not going to run around 30 yards behind the line of scrimmage and then find somebody downfield, like Josh Allen was able to do a few times. When it comes to covering tight ends, I'd be interested to see what kind of recourse Anthony Weaver has for that, if there is anything this season that they can do. But I think right now the key is going to be, and I think that it's something they'll be able to do relatively successfully against this iteration of the Commanders, is to put themselves into positions where they're not as exposed to the risk of being hurt by the tight end. Forcing Washington into kind of desperate situations on 3rd and 12, 3rd and 13. And I mean, you can still complete a pass to the tight end in those situations. But putting yourself in position where, because you have really good tackling at the second level, between Minkah Fitzpatrick, between Dante Trader, your linebackers, even Rasul Douglas is a very good open field tackler. Putting yourself in positions to allow those 5-yard completions and then come up and rally tackle. I think they should be able to do that with some regularity on Sunday.
Well, I think it all depends on how this front can handle this Washington offensive line, Coach. I don't know if you watched this Commanders offensive line, but they got some dudes in the trenches. You have an all-pro, former Dolphin, Laramie Tunsil at the left tackle spot. You have Patrick Paul's brother, Chris Paul, in the left guard spot. Center Tyler Biotic, right guard Sam Cosmi from Texas, and the second-year pro Josh Connerly Jr. from Oregon. They got some young guys. They got some certified vets as well on both sides of the line. This is a very good Washington offensive line. And if they bring their 6 offensive linemen, like I believe it's either Fant or Coleman, that is their 6 offensive linemen, kind of like how Dan Brunskill is the Dolphins. They can also do some damage. And both Zach Ertz and John Bates, their second tight end, who's primarily their blocking tight end, in those, 2 tight end, 13 personnel looks, that's going to be very, very tough. If the Dolphins defensive line can control, the Commanders offensive line and get Marcus Mariota off a schedule, I think I think they can win this game pretty comfortably. But if they can't, the question is going to be, can this Dolphins secondary hold up against the play action shots that will come through off of these heavy formations? Because if they're running the ball well, these linebackers, especially Jordan Brooks, Tyrell Dotson, and maybe even Willie Gay, uh, they are going to try and sell out against the run because they're going to bait our linebackers and safeties with these run looks.
Yeah, I think that I even outside of Jaden Daniels not playing in this game, I feel a lot better with the Dolphins playing against the Commanders at this point in the season than I would have earlier in the year. Like you read through that list of the starting offensive line, right? And then Brandon Coleman, Nick Allegretti, Andrew Wiley, George Fant. Like those are all solid names. Like maybe not guys that are needle movers, but there's a lot of depth on that offensive line. And I think that even across that offensive line, there's a lot of solid players. Josh Connerly, that he's actually a rookie this year. But they're all 5 of those guys are, probably average to above average players. And, they're not going to go out there and you're not going to see, the Aaron Brewer highlight blocks out of them. But you are going to see a consistent group playing together. And earlier in the season, the way that our defensive line played, the way that, some of the lanes were left open because guys weren't playing with good gap integrity, then I would be more concerned with a group of average linemen being able to create a crease that can get there. But with where the Dolphins defense, particularly that front 7, is playing right now, I like the individual matchups across that offensive line or across our defensive line more than I would have, earlier in the year. Like I feel that guys like Chop Robinson and Bradley Chubb are going to have some success around the edges. And I feel like, the Zach Sealer, the Kenneth Grant, the Jordan Phillips, even Benito Jones, I feel like are going to be able to hold up well in the run game and keep the linebackers free. And we should see both Tyrell Dodson and Jordan Brooks being able to, slice through some lanes and make some tackles. So I just with the way the defense is playing together now, I feel a lot more confident about them playing against this line that really doesn't have an awful player on there. Like we see a lot of offensive lines. Like a lot of offensive lines have that one guy that you can say, like, here's where we attack. I don't feel like Washington really has that, but I think that the consistent level of player on the Dolphins defensive line is still better than the level of individual talent on the Commanders line.
Yeah, I think when you look at just the depth, I can't believe that I can believe it in context of the defensive line. I mentioned depth in the defensive backfield earlier in this pod, and that kind of blew my mind. But when you talk about the depth along the defensive line, I think that that's really what makes the difference, because Washington will attempt to run the football. Their game plan is going to be run, and run some more. Because when you look at the pass catchers that they do have out, it's no Terry McLaurin, it's no Luke McCaffrey. Deebo Samuel is still a very capable pass catcher in his own right, but they're going to be very shorthanded in the passing game. But the Dolphins' ability to shuffle their defensive linemen, their ability to go with different looks, whether it's a 4-man front or a 5-man front, the versatility of guys like Zach Sealer to kind of line up at either spot. And when they do go to a 5-man front, I mean, is it 3 tackle? I mean, obviously Sealer's playing the 3 technique, so he's a third tackle in that spot, but he's giving you pretty much the same skill set that an edge would give you along the middle, which makes those fronts even viable at times, in pass rushing situations, as crazy as that sounds. It just, I think with the versatility and the depth that they have along that line, when you think about guys like Kenneth Grant and Jordan Phillips and Benito Jones and even Zeke Biggers, Zach Sealer, I mean, they're legitimately going, I think that's 5 or 6 deep along the defensive line, and those are guys you feel good about. I think that they'll be, the depth of the line is going to be kind of what keeps them afloat here versus the Commanders' run offense.
Yeah, I think overall this Dolphins team looks nothing like the one we saw in September. They've evolved physically, mentally, and even schematically. This offense has traded flash for function. This defense has traded chaos for cohesion. And the result is a balanced team that can win in multiple ways. Going to Madrid will be the ultimate test of this new identity. And the big question is, can they carry this blueprint across the Atlantic? If they can, I think the NFL and the league might need to start putting Miami on that graphic that says in the hunt for the playoffs. They could be in the hunt. They could be knocking on the door as they always have been. But the storyline is going to be, can they finish? All right, stick with us here on Scouting the Fins, part of the 3 Yards Per Carry podcast feed, also part of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. And as always, voy aletas.